Glad you could join me on the news. The headline says Xi Jinping to meet Putin next week in first visit to Moscow since invasion of Ukraine. Last year, Sri Lanka's economy reduced by a record 7.8%. Australia plans to purchase 220 Tomahawk cruise missiles from US. China's Foreign Minister Gang urges solution to Ukraine war in sporadic call, and North Korea affirms launch ICBM, says it was Hwasong 17. Here are the details of the news. The Chinese Foreign Ministry announced Friday that China's President Xi Jinping will visit Russia next week at the invitation of President Vladimir Putin. It will be Xi's first visit to Moscow since Putin launched his devastating invasion of Ukraine over a year ago. During the visit, Xi and Putin will deliberate strategic cooperation between the two countries, according to the Kremlin. An exchange of opinions is also planned in the context of strengthening Russia-Chinese cooperation in the international arena, the Kremlin added. A number of important bilateral documents will also be signed. The visit comes as China attempts to present itself as an unbiased peace broker on Ukraine, but the effort has been met with doubt in Western capitals due to Beijing's increasing partnership with Moscow. Xi and Putin declared a no-limits friendship in February last year when the Russian leader visited Beijing for the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Weeks later, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. China has refused to condemn Russia's invasion since then or refer to it as such, instead blaming the advance of NATO for aggravating the conflict and repeating the Kremlin's instance. It has also provided diplomatic backing for Moscow while boosting economic and military ties to its northern neighbor. In recent weeks, Western officials have started publicly raising concerns that China may be considering improving Russia with lethal military aid, an accusation Beijing denies. Putin hosted China's top diplomat Wang Yi in Moscow last month, just days before the anniversary of the Kremlin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The high-profile visit was broadly believed to be a forerunner to a meeting between Putin and Xi. Putin told Wang relations between his country and China are reaching new milestones, while Wang promised to further strengthen our comprehensive strategic partnership. Wang landed in Moscow after U.S. officials went public with concerns about how China's continuing partnership with Russia could have an effect on the war in Ukraine, and hours after Putin made a major speech on the conflict in which he announced plans to suspend Russia's involvement in its last remaining nuclear arms treaty with the United States. On Sri Lanka's economy, Sri Lanka's crisis-hit economy declined by a record 7.8% last year. Official data shows as the country battled with its worst financial crisis in 7 decades. The island's fourth quarter gross domestic product (GDP) contracted by 12.4%, according to the figures released by the state-run Census and Statistics Department on Thursday. Moody's Investors Service said on Monday that Sri Lanka's growth is likely to shrink by 3% this year, but growth is anticipated to rebound in 2024. An unprecedented economic crisis triggered huge protests in the island nation when a mob stormed the home of then-President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, forcing him to flee the country and resign. A new government since then has worked for fix Sri Lanka's battered public finances and secure a sorely needed International Monetary Fund (IMF) bailout. Last year's contraction, the biggest in the country's 75 years of independence, compared with 3.5% growth in 2021, a 4.6% contraction in 2020 as the coronavirus pandemic hit. It was caused by the deepening of the economic crisis, frequent power disruptions, shortages in fuel, raw materials, and foreign currencies, the Census and Statistics Department said in a statement. The data showed some improvement in Sri Lanka's fiscal position, with inflation moderating to about 50% in February, down from a record high of 69.8% in September. President Ranil Wickremesinghe has added taxes and ended general subsidies on fuel and electricity to improve government revenue after his predecessor defaulted on Sri Lanka's $46 billion foreign debt last year. The reforms are precondition of a $2.9 billion rescue package from the IMF, which Sri Lanka expects to finalize next week. But the tax and price spikes have been roundly unpopular, causing protests and industrial stoppages around the country. About 40 trade unions cautioned on Thursday they plan a general strike next week if their demands for concessions on the severity program were not met. Sri Lanka targets to announce a debt restructuring strategy in April and step up talks with commercial creditors ahead of IMF review of a bailout package in 6 months, its central bank governor said last week. Wickremesinghe has said Sri Lanka can expect to remain bankrupt until at least 2026 and insisted his government has no option but to implement the reforms demanded by the IMF. Sri Lanka's economy shrank 11.8% in July to September quarter from a year ago, the second worst quarterly contraction ever for the country. Australia plans to buy up to 220 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States after the U.S. State Department approved the sale in a deal valued at closely $900 million. The deal, which the Pentagon says involves up to 220 Tomahawk cruise missiles and technical support, comes just days after Australia announced it will buy 3 nuclear-powered attack submarines with an option to obtain 2 more from the U.S. amidst worries over China's increasing military presence in the Indo-Pacific. Australian officials said the latest nuclear-powered submarines will be able to fire Tomahawk missiles. Australia is one of our most important allies in the Western Pacific, the U.S. Department of Defense said in a statement on Friday. Australia's strategic location contributes significantly to making sure peace and economic stability in the region, the department added. By deploying the Tomahawk weapon system, Australia will contribute to global readiness and enhance the capability of U.S. forces operating alongside them globally, it said. The Tomahawk's jet-powered cruise missiles, used mainly by the U.S. and United Kingdom, will cost an approximated $895 million. The proposed sale of this equipment and support will not alter the basic military balance in the region, the Defense Department added. Australia's Defense Minister Richard Marles said Australia needed long-range missiles. Australia's Minister for the Defence Industry, International Development and the Pacific, Pat Cournoy, said the missiles could be fired from the Virginia-class submarines that Australia announced it will buy from the United States. Former Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating this week launched a blistering attack on the submarine deal, saying that it must be the worst deal in all history because of the massive cost. Australian officials have estimated the cost of the submarines at about $268 million and $368 billion Australian dollars over 30 years. Officials have also pointed out that investments in the submarine project, which would finally see Australia and the United Kingdom jointly develop a fresh submarine model, would create some 20,000 jobs in Australia. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the government had been crystal clear about the cost of the project. Again on Russia-Ukraine war, Qin Gang, China's foreign minister, has told his Ukrainian counterpart that Beijing is worried about the war against Russia getting out of control and urged discussions on a political solution with Moscow. Qin told Ukraine's foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba that China wanted to see peace talks advance during a sporadic phone conversation on Thursday, the foreign ministry in Beijing said in a statement. China always upheld a neutral and fair stance on the Ukraine issue, Qin told Kuleba, according to the statement. The minister also said China has committed itself to endorsing peace and advancing negotiations and calls on the international community to form conditions for peace talks, according to the statement. Kuleba later tweeted that he and Qin discussed the significance of the principle of territorial integrity and that he had underscored the importance of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's peace formula for ending Russia's war on Ukraine. Zelensky's 10-point peace formula includes, among other elements, the restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity, on which there will be no negotiations, the withdrawal of all Russian soldiers and of all hostilities, and the creation of a special tribunal to prosecute Russian war crimes. On Thursday, China's rare engagement in the war on Ukraine follows Beijing's recently proposed 12-point roadmap for a political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. China has burnished its credentials on an independent mediator after hosting meetings last week at which longtime antagonists Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore full diplomatic relations. But Beijing's newfound interest in seeing an end to the a year-long war in Ukraine must deal with China's 2022 declaration of no limits friendship with Russia. China has also refused to condemn Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, while at the same time declaring that the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries should be respected. Beijing has, however, condemned Western sanctions on Russia and accused NATO and the United States of provoking Russia's attack on Ukraine. Moving ahead, North Korea has confirmed it launched an intercontinental ballistic missile and that it was the Hwasong-17, known as the country's monster missile. The firing of the banned missile was detected by neighbors South Korea and Japan on Thursday, hours before South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol was set to fly to Tokyo for a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. It was the newest in a series of weapons tests that have coincided with Freedom Shield, the large-scale joint military drills between the United States and South Korea that started on Monday and that Pyongyang regards as a rehearsal for invasion. On Friday, confirming the ICBM test, North Korea said it was planning to demonstrate a tough response posture and was a reaction to the provocation and aggressive military exercises. Pyongyang said the missile traveled at a maximum altitude of some 6,000 kilometers, 3,700 miles, and flew some 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles before precisely landing on the preset area in the open waters of the East Sea of Korea, also known as the Sea of Japan. Pictures accompanying the reports showed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un watching the launch with his daughter and included pictures from space apparently shot by a camera mounted on the missile. Seoul and Washington have improved defense cooperation in the face of mounting military and nuclear threats from North Korea, which conducted a record number of weapon tests in 2022 as it ramped up its military modernization campaign. On Friday, the U.S. and South Korea announced they will start the Sanyong large-scale amphibious landing exercises from March 20th, with 40 British Marines also taking part. Like Freedom Shield, the drills have been suspended since 2018 as part of the attempt to make progress on North Korea denuclearization. And there are more stories on politics. At landmark summit, Japan-South Korea moved to mend relations. The presidents of Japan and South Korea were all smiles as they agreed to put a century of difficult history to one side and work together to counter regional security challenges. The Tokyo summit between South Korea's Yoon Suk-yeol and Japan's Fumio Kishida is the first visit to Japan by a South Korean president in 12 years, emphasized how the two United States allies have been brought closer by North Korea's regular missile launches and rising concern over China's more assertive positioning on the international stage. Just hours before Yoon arrived in Tokyo, North Korea test-fired a banned intercontinental ballistic missile, the newest in a series of launches over the past week. The two leaders bonded over food and reached an agreement on some prickly issues, agreeing to recover regular bilateral visits and recommence the security dialogue suspended in 2018. Yoon declared the complete normalization of an intelligence sharing pact known as GSOMIA, which Seoul had threatened to pull out in 2019. They also announced an end to an almost 4-year trade disagreement over some high-tech materials used for semiconductors. Strengthening Japan-South Korea ties in the current strategic environment is urgent, Kishida said, according to reports at a joint conference with Yoon after the discussions. I hope this visit will nurture trust and friendship and significantly elevate Japan-South Korea relations. Japan said the new shuttle diplomacy could include Kishida inviting Yoon to the G7 summit in Hiroshima in May and then visiting Seoul. You noted that the grave threat posed to international peace and security by North Korea's missile launches. Following their summit and press conference, Kishida hosted a dinner for Yoon, who had reportedly made a precise menu request. Washington hailed the summit, calling Japan and South Korea indispensable allies. Russia-Ukraine war, waging now progresses in Bakhmut as Russia offensive seems to decline. As Russian offensive power appeared to fade out across Ukraine's eastern front, mercenary forces from Russia's Wagner Group doubled down on attacks against the Ukrainian defenders of Bakhmut city in the Donetsk region during the 55th week of the war. Ukraine Colonel Oleksii had said Russian ground raids had reduced over the past week across the front from a high of up to 100 per day to below 30 per day, while there were between 2 and 9 attacks at night. He believed Russian forces had suffered substantial manpower and equipment losses. The Institute for the Study of War, ISW, a Washington, D.C.-based think tank, believed Russia's offensive in the Luhansk region, which neighbors Donetsk, was petering out. The United Kingdom's Defense Ministry, in its newest intelligence update, reported that fighting had also slowed around Volodya and in the Donetsk region, and the only recent success had been seen in the battle for Bakhmut. The ISW also alleged Russian forces were not chasing active or successful offensive operations elsewhere in the theater of war. It said that as the pace of operations slows along vital sectors of the front, Ukrainian forces possibly have an ended opportunity to regain their initiative. But in Bakhmut, the city in the Donetsk region where Russia and Ukraine have invested enormous resources, fighting was increasing. On March 10th, Russian forces were moving into areas of eastern Bakhmut evacuated by Ukrainian soldiers when they retreated west of the Bakhmutsa River on March 8th. On March 11th, Ukrainian Eastern Forces spokesman Colonel Siri Cherevati said fighting in Bakhmut had deepened in the past week and that there were 23 combat clashes in the city over the past day alone. The following day, he said over 39 combat clashes took place within Bakhmut. The General Staff of Ukraine Armed Forces also reported that Ukrainian forces had repelled Russian attacks on Bakhmut. Wagner Group mercenaries have led Russia's fight in Bakhmut for months, tried in February to enclose the city first from the south, then from the north in an effort to choke off supplies to the Ukrainian defenders. But they have so far failed to do so. However, within Bakhmut, Ukrainian forces appear to be in a protracted tactical retreat. I'll take a short break, and when I come back, it will be Zuma Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back. I bring you more stories from Nigeria. President-elect says, I plan to form a government of national competence. Amidst calls on him by some partisans to build a government of national unity, yesterday President-elect Asiwaju Bola Tinubu said he has a higher ambition, which is to form a government of national competence. Yesterday, in a statement in Abuja, Tinubu said neither religion nor ethnicity or other such considerations would determine appointments, but swore to make sure a full integration of youths and women. Salihu Lukman, National Vice Chairman Northwest of the party, had on Friday called for religious balancing in the incoming administration, saying with a Muslim president and vice president, there was need to replace the national chairman of the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, Senator Abdullahi Adamu, with a Christian. Lukman equally made a case for the zoning of the office of the Senate President to the Southeast/South-South, and that the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, SGF, and other important appointments be made with such sensitivity in mind. However, Tinubu said, and I quote, as your incoming president, I accept the task before me. There has been talk of a government of national unity. My aim is higher than that. I seek a government of national competence. In selecting my government, I shall not be weighed down by consideration inessential to ability and performance. The day for political gamemanship is long gone. I shall assemble competent men and women and young people from across Nigeria to build a safer, more prosperous and just Nigeria. There shall be young people, women shall be prominent, whether your faith leads you to pray in the church and mosques or will not determine your place in government, character and competence will. Guba elections, leadership not a do-or-die affair, says Jonathan. Ahead of Saturday's planned governorship and House of Assembly polls, ex-President Goodluck Jonathan has called on politicians to bear in mind that leadership is not a do-or-die affair. He advised them to shun politics of desperation and killing. On Wednesday, the former president spoke at Sampao community in the Kolokuma/Opokuma local government area of Bayelsa State shortly after paying a condolence visit to Governor Doye Diri over the demise of his father, Pa Abraham Diri. According to him, politics should be about service and not about self, urging politicians to wait for God's time to get into leadership positions. A statement on Thursday by Diri's Chief Press Secretary Daniel Alabra quoted the former president to have said that in a democracy, the people play a critical role, wondering why those who aspire to lead want to force themselves on the people. He said leadership is not by force, it's about serving the people. So if you want to lead the people, you cannot kill them before you lead them. In Bayelsa, the challenges will be minimal because we do not have governorship election on Saturday, but I I urge our people to conduct themselves well. Speaking on the late Padiri, Jonathan said the death of a parent was painful, but urged the family of the departed to take solace in the worthy legacies he had left behind. And finally, on the news on tax revenue, Nigeria, United Kingdom signs Memorandum of Understanding. Nigeria and United Kingdom UK have signed a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, on adding the country's tax revenue. The announcement was contained in a statement issued by the United Kingdom High Commissioner in Abuja. The UK also will be playing host to heads of state and government from 24 African countries with British and African business leaders. The meeting is the second UK African Investment Summit. The second edition has been planned for between April 23rd and 24th, 2024 in London. On the MOU, the UK HM Revenue and Customs will work with the Federal Inland Revenue Service to aid boost Nigeria's domestic revenues. The MOU will assist guarantee that multinational enterprises, MNEs, pay the right amount of tax in Nigeria. It will also help assess tax liabilities of firms and high net worth individuals, HNWIs. The statement partly stated that UK and Nigeria confirm their shared interest in pursuing a potential enhanced trade and investment partnership, ETAP, which will offer an alternative high-profile mechanism to progress bilateral economic issues of mutual strategic importance. This was agreed in November 2022 at the 8th and final UK-Nigeria Economic Development Forum, EDF, established primarily by former Prime Minister Theresa May and President Muhammadu Buhari in August 2018 to address market access barriers, respond to opportunities and challenges of doing business, and boost bilateral trade and investment between our two countries. Under the ETIP, both countries will continue to work together to resolve market access issues and enhance economic cooperation. According to a statement issued by the UK High Commission in Abuja, the UK-Africa Summit is building on the €6.5 billion of deals and €8.9 billion of investment commitments achieved at the 2020 summit. The summit, the statement further stated, aims to promote two-way trade and investment, creating jobs and growth, and supporting women entrepreneurs. The 2024 UK-African Summit will bring together heads of state and government from 24 African countries with British and African business leaders. It will strengthen UK-African partnerships to create jobs and growth, supporting British and African talent in sectors such as finance and technology, and promote women entrepreneurs. To refresh our memories, Xi Jinping to meet Putin next week in first visit to Moscow since invasion of Ukraine. Last year, Sri Lanka's economy reduced by a record 7.8%. Australia plans to purchase 220 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States. China's Foreign Minister Kang urges solution to Ukraine war in sporadic call, and North Korea affirms launch. ICBM says it was Hwasong 17. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Turaki. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a beautiful weekend ahead.